here we are. We're on the final part. Actually, isn't that much left, but I'm going to do the scripture, which is a long scripture, and I'm going to read it out. And as we read it out, I'm going to explain. But here we go. Where we left off, I was coming up to the part of the next generation. So, as we talked about, the next generation is going to be, the enemy is going to try to re-enter on the next generation. Remember, the enemy only leaves you for one season. So, he may leave you for the season, and you're going to get yourself together, and you're still going to deal with certain things that may happen to you during a season, but it's going to attempt to come for your children. It is. Because if it can enter through your children, whichever way, eye, ear, nose, mouth, mental, emotionally, physically, spiritually, whatever it can do, however it can try to re-enter or create an iniquity in them in order for them to have a ability to give it permission to come back, it's gonna try it. It's gonna try it. So there may be an attack on the next generation that has been positioned in history for it to repeat upon that generation, for which it is striving to seek wisdom from the generation before. That means they gotta go to the generation before. Yo mama. If for instance it leaves me alone and my children grow up, but I am praying over my children, they may have to come back to me if they start to seek or see these things happening to them. In a lot of cases, the parent can see it. If the person is spiritually wise, they can see it and they can pray over their kids. But what ends up happening is there may be an element where the enemy is going to come after the kids because it knows it can manipulate the kids more than it can manipulate the parent. So the parent has to pray heavily over the kids to cover the kids, because there are certain spiritual attacks that may try to come against the babies. A lot of the words I've been seeing recently is that the enemy's trying to steal the babies. And it was funny because I mentioned this before in one of my previous videos a while back, but all of a sudden I was on YouTube the other day, like a few weeks back, and the clip from the movie Obsessed, where Beyonce comes in with her husband to meet the babysitter, and the babysitter says, "Oh, your friend came to visit your son and leave him a gift." And she's like, "What friend?" And she's like, "Oh, your friend, you gave her permission." They ran upstairs and the baby's gone. And then they ran around trying to find the son, which they end up finding at the end of the clip, where the son is sitting in the back seat of the father's car with a kiss mark on the top of his head. This is what the enemy does. The enemy will try to intimidate you by creating a situation to bring or breed fear within you of authorities. What did I say in the previous video? Incarceration, jail, mental institution. And sometimes they just try to kill you. Steal, kill, and destroy. In order to prevent you from walking into the fullness. So it will try to come after your children in these manners, in order to try to reopen the door. Remember, Isaac had to dig his father's wells again. They will try to create open doors in your children so that your children will mess up what you dug, and then your grandchildren will have to dig that up if you teach them right. There will be strongholds that will come back heavier and harder in that next generation. Remember I told you about the seven, when the enemy sees that a house has been swept clean, it brings back 7 demons. It cannot enter. The whatever principality was on you cannot go to those kids. But it can bring something that is 7 times worse. 7 friends worse than himself to hit your children. Because he got to hit hard if he's going to get you in that generation. But being that you're the mother or the grandmother. Notice that in films you'll see that they got to go back to the original characters. Because I remember I was talking about in a previous video that when the Lord led me to go and watch this film, I was like, why am I going to watch that? I don't watch horror films. Why are you having me look at this? And he's like, watch the film. And there were two things I got a chill on. And that's how I knew the Lord was having me watch this film. And it was very specific. The origin, the original character, and the legend, the legendary. The fact of the legend that the characters that were originally from the film were legends to the series. So they had to come back, or else it wasn't going to work. They had to get their advice in order to figure it out from that original generation, and if they were going to survive. So what the enemy does is he tries to try the generation that seems oblivious to what is happening, because they're literally re-walking out the exact same series and sequence of things that were happening previously, but they don't recognize it. This is why you can see certain things happening in the world and it'll be a repeat of something that happened before. I'm going to tell you this, and some of y'all may not know this, but some of y'all may be able to look this up. Somebody took a photograph and did a split screen. Remember, right after Trayvon Martin died, there was a young boy that was shot and killed by the police. He was 12 years old. He was the second case during that time frame when you saw Trayvon Martin get killed, and then the first guy that got choked to death before the kneeling incident right around the entrance of the Pandora's box. This boy was shot and killed. They showed the surveillance video of the boy in the park that night, and the cop shot him. Someone took the photograph of this boy that was shot and then took a picture of Emmett Till from, everybody know when Emmett Till died, and they took them and put them side by side doing a split. The boy that was killed a few years ago by that cop that was 12 years old was the exact image when the two were put together of Emmett Till and this boy. There was an episode of a TV show that I used to watch, and it was called Hansel and Gretel, I think. And what happened is there was a boy and a girl. Every 50 years, this boy and this girl would come back, and everybody would get in an uproar in the town about this boy and this girl being murdered. But nobody ever searched to find out who these kids' parents were. They never found out anything about the story. They just knew that we got to defend these two kids. But there was no evidence around other than the story of these two people being killed. And it would come up every 50 years. I'm going to leave that right there. With that being said, it starts with them and ends with them, meaning the original people that were involved, whether it was the grandmother that committed a crime, whether it was the people that survived, especially in that film, it was the people that survived that were part of the main storyline, that it was them. Is that a bug? What the hell is that? Something just flew on my porch, directly onto my porch. Oh my goodness. If it moves, bruh. And it moved. Hold on 1 second. Okay. I'm back. Now, With this being said, it starts with the previous generation and it ends with them. Whatever knowledge they carried is the key that unlocks the end of the generational curse. Now, my people perish for the lack of knowledge. Most generations, you see children and kids, they know everything. They understand everything. They know better than their parents know, and that's why they end up running into problems, because they didn't go and ask their parents, or they didn't follow the directions their parents gave them. It's the kids that were very attentive to their parents, and their parents gave them wisdom when they were growing up and were attentive to them. It gave them that balance in order to help them, and it helped them to keep from going into issues and problems later on. Sometimes the old ones have to die off so that the next generation can take over. As we recall in the story from I believe it's Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and the story of Joshua, the previous generation had to die off because they were out there in the wilderness for 40 years when the next generation had to walk in. It's their children that had to go into the promised land, not them. Because they need to be moved from the back to the front. They need to be a transfer of power. A couple of days ago, the queen just passed away, and her power was literally just transferred onto her son Charles yesterday, I think it was. And they now have to fight for the inheritance. There is a fight now in the spirit. I'm not talking about them no more. I'm talking about your generational curse. The children have to fight for their inheritance. This is when you have the prodigal son. He asked for inheritance and the parents gave it to him. But then your father will give you the inheritance. But you end up potentially running into problems later on. But understand this. There is a just judge, and God will bring judgment for you. And when the judgment comes, we are entering into a season of judgment, and it's coming against those prior generations, the people that have been standing in the way of the manifestation of the promises. I was just listening to the apostle this morning, and he was talking about the manifestation has to happen now. There has been a spirit of delay that has sat amongst the children of God to prevent their mobility to getting to where they're supposed to go. And there is a judgment that is being prepared to be released against the previous generations, and the generational curses, meaning all the things I was saying that have been tied to your parents, the witchcraft, all of these types of things. You're going to see people getting smited down in this season. And after watching the movie The Fallen, I went back and looked at the scripture, because the whole movie was pointing you to Revelations 18:2. But when I went back, I looked at everything else that it was talking about. Now, what it was talking about, and I'm going to go through this, is Revelations 18. After this, I saw an angel come down from heaven, and he had a great authority in the earth, illuminated by his splendor, with a mighty voice he shouted, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great." Because I'm going through this and the Lord is speaking, you're about to see a lot of things come down in our world. God is pulling down the idols. I've said this before. I'm going to say it again. God's pulling down the idols. You're about to see things, images, people, and places come down. She has become a dwelling for demons. in these nations, states, countries, political positions and arenas, you are seeing people that are infested with demonic principalities, then they're coming down. Haunted for every impure spirit. As the fallen spoke, there was an impure spirit that was transferring from body to body. Just as your generational curses were operating as spirits to torment specific family members, friends, associates, so on and so forth. And they had a slew of them. Remember, in I think it's Matthew, where when Jesus comes to talk to the man, and the man said, we are legion. It was a legion of demons within them. A haunting for every unclean bird. I remember when I was going through my dark season, we saw crows everywhere. I mean, it was ridiculous how many crows. And somebody usually always ended up dying right around the time we saw crows. Anytime you start to see crows, dead rats, dead insects, dead things, that means God's doing a cleaning. He's about to start cleaning house. For the nations have drunk and are maddened with wine. Remember how I said that there's been a spirit of a madman and insanity that is in operation. So this is straight God, because I wasn't going to look this up. But this is what came up after I finished looking at the movie The Fallen. So I ended up pulling the whole scripture up. Adulterousness, the king of committing adultery with her. Remember David. Those in politics that have been doing adulterous things against the nation and God's church. Remember, the church is the bride. Will not escape judgment of Babylon. I'm gonna leave that alone right now, but I see it. With a plague, her sins. Hold on one second, because